All of these little moments in our lives are just snapshots of time, you know. So what's the eternal? What's the capital E eternal?
I think it's hard for people to contemplate and sit at that level when the system has us so fixated on surviving. And
True.
The way that you can control any population is to continually keep them in stress and survival mode. Because when they're continually run by fear, they will placate and then surrender so that they can secure safety. It is just in our nature as human beings. Except once in a while,
The domestication of the human animal.
there is once in a while some people who will say enough is enough,
Yeah.
and they will pierce through the veil and say this is what's actually happening. When say pay no attention to the man behind the curtain, no, there's a man behind the curtain, and we're tired of this game, and we need to evolve the game.
There's a lot of mystics on the internet. Shout out and much love, you crazy fools, that could use dusting off a textbook or two, warmly, without judgment. And secondarily, there are certainly a lot of scholars in academia who would be well served by eating a mushroom. So I'm trying to bridge those two worlds. I'm Bob Peck, and this is Karmic Relief.
My background is in documentary film and comparative religion. I wrote a book called Original Sin is a Lie: How Spirituality Defies Dogma and Reveals Our True Self.
It's an interview show where I talk to spiritual teachers, activists, scholars, people that live within these traditions and also appreciate the overlap. What happens when you start to get activated internally, that makes you activated in a compassionate way in the world. I'm thrilled to be talking to fantastic, inspiring human beings. I have to do much less work, which is nice because I'm just asking them questions about their story. It's a life hack.
Hi.
I hope you'll enjoy these explorations, these really excavations. In the ones I've filmed so far, they've all been really beautiful and deep and lighthearted. So please enjoy Karmic Relief. I'm Bob Peck. I wrote Original Sin is a Lie, and now I'm asking a bunch of questions to intelligent, compassionate humans.
Rubén Cantú is always innovating. Ever since growing up in a modern-day cult-like Christian community, Luz Del Mundo, the light of the world, Rubén has been pushing for positive change. Look, they might not be evil, but anyone who says we are the chosen people, headed to be with God, and no one else is, that's a cult to me. That never sat well with Rubén either, as he continued his work in the world on behalf of social impact, local community entrepreneurship, and no shortage of Austin, Texas projects in creativity and activism. He has always been guided by love. Ultimately, that's the gateway to eternity. Not fear, not division, but love. I thoroughly enjoyed our conversation earlier this summer at a park in East Austin. Thanks for watching.
I've known you for 40 years.
It seems like it.
It really, we have known each other for like multiple incarnations
I
in
think
the
so.
same incarnation.
You're like, you're still here.
We're both still in East Austin. We met at Core Media offices in 2008. So,
Wow. Yeah.
I know. By the train tracks. And let me just intro this guy. Producer, professor, community activist, mentor, entrepreneur, writer, and executive director of the Office of Inclusive Innovation and Entrepreneurship at the University of Texas at Austin. That's a lot of words.
I've never actually said all those words together all at once, so thank you.
It's a lot.
It's a lot.
You do a lot. He got a call while we were setting up with a guy trying to get a meeting with him. You know, we're going to talk about your story. You're also, you and I relate because you have spiritual inclinations, and you have a very interesting background, which I'm not sure how much you have talked about publicly.
I'm happy to talk about it.
It'd be really great to talk about it today.
Yeah.
And it's relevant to my work, and I think, you know, if you're listening to this show, you will appreciate the light which is Rubén.
Thank you.
And
The light
many definitions of that.
the light that which is all of us.
That's right. La luz del mundo de todos.
Yes.
Yeah, and we've got coffee a bunch in the last few years and talked non-duality and the illusion and compassionate action in the dream and so on. So we're going to go to a lot of fun places, I imagine. But starting off, I mean, at the top, obviously, of your bio is that you are a first-generation college student. You are the son of a family of Mexican migrant workers.
Yeah, my father actually migrated here when he was 18. He wasn't a migrant worker per se, but my mom's side, they were. And so they established themselves. My dad here came and was a blue-collar worker, migrant worker.
Work in the fields, man. Early mornings, late nights.
It's hard work.
It's hard work. You weren't out there, but
My mom was.
your mom was.
Yeah.
And when you were a kid.
No,
Or before.
This is when she was a kid.
When she was a kid.
Yeah.
Right.
But my aunts and uncles were all working the fields.
Yeah. And that's an incredible amount of hard work and resilience and low pay, and it's this sheer determination and drive to make a good living for your family.
I think yes, and while life wasn't easy, everything that they told me was it was a beautiful life.
Yeah.
In the sense that I was talking to a friend about this just earlier. It's like the wealthier we get as a country, the more unhappier we are.
Right.
And so this dichotomy, this the catch-22 of like, we think that when we acquire more wealth, it'll bring more satisfaction and happiness. But yet we find some people find their bliss in some of the simplest things in life. So I'm not saying that we should be supporting oppression. What I'm saying is that it's interesting how we can frame things that allow us to still enjoy the parts of being human.
Have you not felt the steering wheel in a Bugatti?
No. I've not ever done that. So maybe I'm speaking out of turn. And I don't know what that means, but
No, you're absolutely right, and it's that false American dream into American nightmare. I've known in my studies in Hinduism, while I haven't been to India in this incarnation, many people I know that have been to India talk about the level of joy that the children have and that the villagers have when they literally have, almost nothing whatsoever. And yet in America we have 2 trash cans and 2 recycle bins full of Amazon boxes of products that we've purchased. And there's sadness and emptiness.
It's interesting because, Jesus talked about how it's harder for a man to get to heaven because he would have to, what was that parable about the needle of the eye of the needle or whatnot?
It's easier for a camel to pass through the eye of the needle than for a rich man to enter the kingdom of heaven.
And so yet we're here on this pursuit for wealth because we're trying to attain happiness. And yet...
It's quite ironic.
Isn't it?
And also, Rubén beat me to a Jesus reference. That's the first time that's happened on this show, that the guest brought up Jesus before me. So shout out, RC.
So, what's your Jesus lovers?
Well, you and I both. It's like, full circle for you.
Yeah.
Because you grew up in a spiritual community. That's a good segue.
Yeah.
And it was Christian.
It was Christian, according non-denominational is the way it was titled, but it had leanings of evangelical training or teaching. The origins are very similar to other sects and denominations.
Got it. However, there are differences.
There are some stark differences, yes.
What was unique? Maybe if there were any pros, and then the cons. And can you say what it was?
Yeah, I grew up in a church called the Light of the World, or La Luz Del Mundo, and I will stand here, and people will probably watch this and call me an apostate or a hypocrite or whatnot.
Heretic.
Heretic is the word I'm looking for. Yes.
Join the club.
I am so thankful for the great teachings that I got. in my upbringing about being respectful, being mindful, taking care of my body, honoring as a temple, putting God first before anything else. There's a lot of great lessons that I got out of it.
Yeah.
And yet on the subversive side, there was like teachings that may not have been the healthiest for me to grow up with. I remember one time growing up, we would be listening to these sermons, and let's say I'm 4 years old, I can understand what they're saying, and I'm going to school, and I started shifting the way I saw my teachers and my classmates, because we were taught that we were the only church that was going to be saved. No other church could ever be saved.
You're the special ones.
We're the special ones, and it's sad for everyone else who was not able to be part of this organization. And so I remember my sister calling out her kindergarten teacher, like, "You're a Gentile and you're going to hell." Like, literally, we were so indoctrinated with this belief that, like, we have the truth, no one else has the truth, and everyone else is going to perish, and our job is to try to save everyone. And it created this, like, deep wound inside of me without even knowing there was a wound created, because I never allowed myself to actually be connected with other people outside of my organization, which made me have colleagues, but not deep friendships. So imagine growing up feeling like you want to connect with people deeper, but what's the point if they're going to perish and you're not going to see them again? You might as well just stay friends with the people that are in your circle. It's a very twisted way. So it was not a very healthy way for me to approach it. And even today, some of the people who see this and they're like, "You're talking bad against us." They can attest that it's not like we can't connect with people in the world, but there's this underlying thing that we're the ones that are going to be saved. Everyone else isn't. And therefore, it makes it for some people, the way I interpret it is that it made it hard for me to actually have true relationships with anyone outside the organization or trust anyone outside the organization.
A lot of people that are familiar with my work I think the people that have resonated with it the most, shout out to essentially a few ex-fundamentalists that I've had deep conversations with, where they came out of chosen people world. And you're not alone, and I really salute your courage and bravery to come out of a community like that, and sounds like you still have loved ones in there. And
I do.
And that's difficult. But it happens all across the world. In every religion, in every culture, there's we're the specialist crew, and everybody else is the unspecialist, and that is the ego's masterpiece. It really is a Mozart play by the ego to create that level of fear, division, separateness, unworthiness of others, and then that also creates that dynamic with your sister to be, cursing the teachers and stuff. So there's a lot of negative impacts with those mindsets. And I guess my question to you as a follow-up question is, when did you start to push up against the netting of it?
I think I'm thankful for my ability to reason that I've given. I believe that that's a higher power that's given me the ability to reason and critically think. And I've always been contemplative. I've always been philosophical since I was a kid. So I was always asking deeper questions, but they never were able to answer it deeper. That, we'll just read the Bible or just pray more for those answers. But ministers weren't able to go deeper with me. And yet, so I was seeking external sources to try to make sense of how the doctrine was truly put together and what other people think about this and that. And I think that I came to a point where in the organization, the international director who was running it passed away. He was the second in command, meaning that the church was founded by the grandfather. The son took over. He passed away. I admired him. We all admired him. We saw him as the representation of Jesus Christ. I consider him like a father figure, per se, that level of like, wow. And when he passed away, it broke my heart. And the church was in turmoil. It was in a place where we didn't know what was next. And even up to that point, they kept talking about how without him, he's the gateway to heaven. If he passes away, then everyone perishes who stays behind. So now I'm thinking, oh, now we're all going to perish and go to hell because we didn't end up going to heaven with him. Right? So there's that running in the background. On top of that, we're told that without a representative of an apostle, is what they call it, that there is no salvation. And so they ushered in, according to divine revelation, a new apostle, the grandson. And he took over. Welcome with big fanfare. There was a lot of doubt, and then now all of a sudden, like, we can calm the congregation, the global congregation.
We need the heir apparent to restore the unity.
The grandfather, the son, now the grandson. But I didn't have that connection there. And they're like, well, you need to pray about it because God needs to reveal and change your heart so that you can accept him. And while I attempted to do that, it kind of, you just know in your heart when things are off. When the majority of the sermons were about what we call the election, like the election is like God's divine election for this man. And it becomes more about promoting and propagating this idea that you have to believe in this man in order to go to heaven, instead of the other spectrum of topics that exist within the Christian doctrine. You ever eat one food for a long time and you get tired of it?
Yeah.
You're like, I want a diversity of, like, a genre of cuisine.
Yeah.
It felt like that, and it felt like I wasn't being...
Hamburgers again.
And while you might love hamburgers one day, or maybe 2 days, 20 days might be a little bit too much.
Yeah.
And so this is the kind of culture that we were growing up in. And to me, I had to make a decision to stop listening to my heart or to finally listen to my heart. And one morning I decided that I could not attend service anymore. And it broke my family's heart. They had raised me in the church. We come from third generation. So my grandparents, my parents, myself, being part of the organization, super thankful for the great values of being an honorable and good citizen. But I could no longer just show up anymore because my mind and my heart weren't aligned to what I was being served. And as much as I prayed about it, I was like, there's more, and I have to find it out. So imagine you have an operating system growing up your entire life, and then it's wiped clean. You separate, and now you have to build your own foundation from the ground up. Literally, what is air? What is space? What are trees? What are nature? How did this come to be?
Like having a stroke or something.
And learning how to walk and speak again.
Yeah.
It's most people are not willing to do that level of work because they just want to be told the answers. Well, the Bible says this. Well, how do we know that the Bible said that? Who wrote the Bible? Where did the Bible come from? What about the Gnostic gospel? Exactly. Divine intervention. And
a guy just said that in one of my comments the other day. I posted a thing disproving the infallibility of the Bible, and this guy said, no, the Bible's infallible. And I said, says zero scholars, Christian and non-Christian. And he said, says God.
And while I believe that I believe you can be divinely inspired to write amazing work.
Right.
That is not immune to people. Like people have the gift to do that. There is a fallibility in all man. And so to me, I needed to go figure out, do I really know what I know so that I can know for myself? And then as I build that up, I can then stand on solid ground saying, it's kind of like the prodigal son. He journeyed off and came back again and was welcome. Except me coming back this time was me coming back to learning who I was as a child of God, first and foremost.
I'd say that you're coming back to Creator, just like the story.
And understanding that me and Creator are one.
Yeah.
And that, like, it is in every single thing that exists, and that it's all that has ever been, and I'm an expression of it. And I get this unique instance in this short time frame to simulate what it means to expand love in this time, space, and field and universe.
So well put. I'm very. I think people listening can relate to your story because it's kind of it's a common theme in deconstruction, right? Kind of capital D, deconstructing Christianity is like what you're talking about with that level of hesitation for people to say, wait a second, if I leave this community, it's also about the relationships, it's about your own knowledge base, there's so many different factors in this.
Who am I if I'm not part of this community?
What's my identity at that point, right?
It feels very lonely, and it was very lonely path to walk. But I'm really glad that I was able to start journaling. See, a second thing was happening at the same time.
And how old are you around this?
I'm now 33. Well, yeah, it was 2016. Yeah, I was 33.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah, 2016.
So you were still a good church-going
as best as I could
20s.
be. Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
As best as I could be.
You can leave at any time, folks. You can leave at 12, 22, 33, 44, 77,
Yes.
100. If you're 95 and you're watching this on YouTube, you can still leave your church. You will see less old people.
I lost my train of thought about where I was going there, but I will say that
You were journaling.
Oh, that's right. Thank you. Thank you for that. Two things were happening at the same time. In my professional career, I was launching a school, and my mission was to try to help more first-generation, low-income, diverse students learn the talents of the skills of entrepreneurship and develop their talents as leaders. As I was partnering with this first cohort, many of them found themselves in a predicament because some of them were undocumented. And as DACA recipients, we had a president that was going to be put in office that was about shaming Mexicans and putting up a wall.
The reality show TV host?
That one.
Yeah.
That one.
He was in Home Alone too.
I believe he was.
Yeah.
And I think he's also been a pro wrestler.
Right. And he has like 80 felonies.
Something like that.
Alleged.
So when he started speaking that way, I mean, I got me irate because I see myself as a father figure to my students, right? Like an example. And
we'll get to your student work.
Okay. And so what's happening is I'm letting out my frustration and anger on social media, calling out the injustice of what's happened and the the unsureness. I think that's what I'm looking for.
2015 was a wild time when the Republican primaries of Trump and Cruz
and so it got me to a point where I said, I'm only causing harm to myself. Like, I'm not actually going to get this man out of the White House by being more irate on Facebook. What would actually make a difference? So there's two things that came to my mind. Dr. King wrote about how darkness cannot drive out darkness, only light can do that. Similar to hate cannot drive out hate, only love can do that. And then Gary Keller from Keller Williams, a real estate company, had written a book called The One Thing. And in there, the maxim was, what is the one thing that you can do such that by doing it makes everything easier or unnecessary? So I combined the two and I said, what would be the one thing that I could do such that by doing it would make everything easier or unnecessary? Like, what is the craziest thing I could do? And I was like, I don't know. Well, I'm writing and I'm angry. So what if I just write about love? Like, just for myself. I'm going to just challenge myself and see how I feel about writing about love for like a week. And of course, the negative talk in my head, because we all have it as humans, right? Like, first off, you don't know anything about love. You're not married. What do you know about love? Like, are you going to write roses are red, violets are blue, da-da-da-da-da. And
hilarious.
I did it anyway. And it actually had an impact, and it made me feel much better. And I said, okay, well, I think I'm good. And I said, well, do you want to try it again since it's my own self-talk? And I was like, yeah, let's try for another week. So 1 week became 2 weeks. I started feeling much better after that. Every day, just journaling about love. Any concept I could think about as much as I could draw out from love. And in this, I didn't know what I was doing, but I was kind of creating a meditative practice where I would just allow myself to surrender and new things would just come into my mind. And in there, new insights about love that I had never heard or written about before started flowing out from me like gushing. And 2 weeks turned into a month turned into 6 months, 6 months turned into a year to 2 years, 3 years, 4 years. And for the past 8 years, there's been a slurry of passages about love that I had no idea in what dimensionality, what context I could ever write in, but this helped bring it to that level. And the beautiful thing about it is I was writing for myself, for my own form of therapy, but it's been such a gift to the community who has followed me and has read, and they're like, your writing saved me, your writing changed me, your writing got me on the right track.
It's fantastic. The pieces I've read online are very, very, very good.
Thank you. And so...
And I'm a snob also.
Well, you're a great writer. So you've done your own writing. And so long story short, I think to me, if people want to know God, the best way to know God is to have a direct relationship with love itself, because God is love. And inherently, as you dive into that relationship, you not only learn how to love yourself more, in that you learn how to have that deeper relationship with God. And then the byproduct of it is that you're able to love people as you love yourself. So in the Christianity, there's 2 commandments. It's really simple, right? You make it really hard. Love God with all your heart, mind, body, and spirit, and love your neighbor as you would love yourself. But the issue is we're never taught how to love ourselves, not in an egoistic or narcissistic kind of way, but in a healthy, supportive, compassionate, yet accountable kind of way where we hold ourselves to a high standard, and then we're able to show that same empathy and support for our fellow brother because they are us. They're an expression of God themselves.
I think you solved it. I think you cracked it. I mean, I'm making a joke, but... there's a couple directions I want to go. One is the word God can feel unknowable to people.
Heavy. It's
a loaded term. I don't really use the word. I've kind of started using it again, almost like a full circle kind of moment. But even my dad, who's literally been a spiritual person for 40 years, and I write about him, and, he was like, reading A Course in Miracles in the 90s and, essential oils and meditation and stuff, all this stuff for like 30, 40 years. And he was like, how can I love someone I have no idea how to connect with them? And to your point, if God and love are synonyms, which is what I believe, and I was just listening to a really great book called Happiness 101, by Reverend Dr. John Mundy, who was a Methodist minister who became a Course in Miracles teacher. He met Helen Schuckman. He met Ken Wapnick. He literally met like the founding group of A Course in Miracles. And he said that this morning in the passage was, God, love, and truth are synonyms. Ego, fear, and illusion are synonyms.
Correct. 100%. Yeah.
And so what you did that sounds like you kind of just stumbled into. You didn't read a book about it. You didn't listen to a podcast about it. You said,
I had to go inside.
Yeah. You found it. You found a method of, hey, I know of love in some capacity.
On a surface level.
Right. This is a way in. This is
I was sitting and meditating in my first...
climbing rope hook.
My first grasp that got me to think about this. And it's the answer now is more nuanced, but this is a paradigm that I set it in my mind when I initially asked myself about love. I asked myself, if a mother loves a child and it doesn't let the child become free because it's scared of what can happen to the child, does the mother truly love the child? What's governing that relationship?
Hard to say no to that, but it's true. Yeah, fear.
Right? It's fear. And so basically I came to understand that hate isn't the opposite of love. Fear is the opposite of love.
Yeah.
And what I realized is that fear is the absence of love, And love is the absence of fear on its purest form.
Yeah.
That doesn't still mean that I can't hold both things. Like, I still am fearful that my kid across the street might get hit by a car. That's still on the human element, right? But we're talking about a deeper metaphysical concept of like, oh, but it's all contained inside of love. It's all contained inside of well-being. All things are happening for me, not to me, so that I can allow myself to surrender so I can be in dance with the Creator.
Absolutely. I just want to sit with that image. It's a yin and yang like relationship, love and fear. Disappearance of the universe, the masters say that human beings are only doing one of two things. They're either expressing love or calling out for love. And that's just the root. There's all these ways that people act, think, speak, behave, etc. But it all comes down to either expressing love or calling out for love. And it's just that lack of recognition, to your point.
Every single action that has been taken, not just in the verbal form, but in the way that we move, it's an expression or a frequency of the intensity of love. So me showing
like
up
anywhere 0 to 100.
Me showing up here to you today is because I love you, right? Right? And then you showing up and giving me this opportunity is because you love me. When I'm able to see it from that lens, it shifts like from a transactional nature that humans operate in to a transformational and ultimately what can create into a transcendental opportunity for us to really understand what it's like to be in this sphere, in this plane, in this flesh, yet be connected to a higher source and a higher consciousness, which I think that we're all moving in towards evolving to get to know ourselves again.
How did you start to integrate this into your day-to-day? I mean, were people seeing your like wacky hippie posts and saying, like, questioning their employment of you?
My best friend, who will remain nameless, I call him one of my brothers. He's like, I read your stuff, but it's just hard to read all the time. I was like, why? It's like, there's no way anyone can be that positive all the time. It's can't take it that seriously. I was like, but that is me. You know me. That is who I am. I do have bad days. I'm human. I get sad. I have emotions.
Right.
But I have a choice, and I don't spiritually bypass. I allow myself to experience the grief, the loss, the anger, and then I remember what is true. And the only thing that is ever true, the ultimate truth, is always, and it sounds so cliche, and you see it in my writing all the time, the grounding force is love. And so when I remember that, everything else softens. Whether I got a job opportunity, whether I got this speaking opportunity, or get past me, it doesn't matter the circumstance. Like, at the end of the day, when I can ground myself in love, and that is what's guiding my actions, that I am now personifying love, which I think that's what Jesus was actually doing, right? He says, like you see me, you'll be doing this and more. You've seen me, you've seen the Father. He was expressing and emanating love, even for those who didn't love him. That is exactly what we've been called to do. Yet at the same time, we see ourselves like, oh, well, you're white, or you're a man, or you're American, or whatever it is. You don't understand me. You'll never understand me. And we stop it. And the intimacy that we can create between all human beings is limited because of our ability to believe that our flesh, our point of view, is the only truth instead of the ultimate truth, which is love at the end of the day.
Yeah, and there also seems to be almost like a component of kind of identity, right? Like body identification, community identification, national, ethnic, cultural, political identification, all of these different layers, which we are playing all the roles, at the same time. My wife calls me my husband, my mother calls me my son calls me my dad. It's still me, but I'm all those different roles to those three different individuals. And in the same way, there's an expansive quality to love, to your point, that is able to envelop all of those identities. Because you're not necessarily saying, I've had a couple of these conversations where it's like, one of the errors, I think, in spirituality, or like myth busting, I guess, is like a little theme of mine. Spiritual myth busting is like, releasing identification with the body. But that doesn't mean you don't brush your teeth. We're still paying rent.
It's the ability to hold both things at the same time. Yeah. And that's what I guess I'm trying to get in my writing and my community to understand, is that, can you hold more than one truth? Like, there's only one truth. Yes, that's love. And in that process, it's getting to know itself, right? And so could you experience me in my body? Not technically, but you can sit with me and walk next to me, right? And we can walk together so I can experience and have the empathy that expands my consciousness, that allows me to see things from a deeper perspective than one that I've been fixated on. And we've been so acculturated to saying, this is right, like, America is the best country ever. And I was like, well, have you traveled internationally? No. Okay, well, maybe you should travel internationally and see for yourself. It's like, Christianity is the best religion ever. Okay, well, have you studied any religions? No.
You've been to a Buddhist temple? They're pretty nice.
Right, and so it's like, can you hold more than one truth? Yeah. And I think for some people, they've been conditioned to say, here's a shortcut, here's the answer, we've done all the work for you, you don't have to think anymore, just go this way.
Yeah.
And it feeds into the power
just the
structure.
Number one, just the Big Mac, baby.
And it feeds into the power structure that ultimately keeps us divided. And if people, like, for example, nowadays, there used to be a time where we didn't want kids to be bilingual, America only, like English only. Now we want kids to learn multiple language because they're more useful that way. And so why are we telling people that they can't understand more than one way of believing? When you understand all the perspectives, you'll understand that they're pointing to the same thing from different pathways. But people are scared.
That's how you lose followers, brother.
That's how you lose followers, and you lose economic power.
The pews. You're so right. And what's so fascinating to me about you as a thinker, but also a doer, is that you're tireless. The intro at the top. I mean, you founded a film company. You carry this depth of wisdom and profundity around these philosophical concepts, and at the same time, like, you have mentored thousands of students. There's a lot. I know this doesn't matter to you or anyone, but you won a lot of awards in community impact and stuff like that. Like, so you're a social impact person in Austin. And I think that's another myth bust. Number 2 is like that spiritual people and someone journaling about love on Facebook is just going to be sitting there by the creek. And I'm sure you do go to the creek sometimes and get recharged. But that's not all you do. You're extremely busy. Like we said, you founded Core Media, which is your production company. You have a film background like me. But soon thereafter, you did Social Good. You did Level Up. Like, walk us through kind of that activation process of like how much your own kind of inner explorations and philosophical groundings of love started to inform your work in the world.
I'm super thankful that I was born when I was born, even though it didn't make sense at the time. But, I remember at 4 years old or something.
1900s.
Right? It seems like it, right? Out of our lifetimes. But I was born in 83, so do the math. I grew up at the time where Reaganomics was in the air.
Yeah.
And so I asked my mom what Reaganomics was. I was a kid, like 4 or 5 or whatever. My mom's trying to explain to me as best she can. For a 5-year-old, say, well, that's basically when the government and corporations or banks decide to support those who have a lot of money, and then eventually that'll trickle down to everyone else. And I was like, but Mom, you're not getting any of that money now. I was like, I know, it doesn't really work. I was like, well, why is it like that, right? So I'm already asking these questions at 5 years old.
Right.
Fast forward to 2008, I'm in my grad school program, and the great crash and recession happens.
Yeah.
And I'm like, wait, so you mean to tell me that these speculators and all these institutions shot ourselves in the foot, and we did this to ourselves?
And then we bailed them out.
Yeah, and then, that's just capitalism. Now, it's a boom and bust cycle. I'm like, but why does it have to be so hard of a crash? I understand ebbs and flows, but we're doing peaks and valleys, and we're letting people lose their homes, be on the street and like in the land of the free, home of the brave, American dream, American pie, all these things. And I'm like, wait, why are we doing this again? So what got me to start thinking is like, wow, I'm just learning how wealth and capital is made. And I'm being trained to go out into the system to be just like everyone else. I was like, no, I want to make wealth because I want to help it circulate inside the community. How do we do that? And so my passion for social entrepreneurship and innovation and all that around became my focus. So when we created the production company, I had a film degree. I wanted to create a film studio. And as we started the commercial side of the company, I said, well, what kind of commercials do we want to make? What kind of industrials do we want to make? And I said, I don't want to just do app videos for startups because I can. Let me find something that actually makes me want to get up in the morning and do things. And so I found amazing nonprofits who loved what I stood for. Because I said, CORE stands for telling stories from the heart. Because the word core, its origin is cour, C-E-U-R. It's French. And it means to tell your story with all of your heart. Coraje, corazón. That's what it means. And so I said, yeah, we're going to name it CORE. It stands for creating opportunities that revolutionize and empower people. And so, and we're going to tell stories from the heart. And so we found amazing nonprofits. We won several awards in doing the work. But we realized that we needed more clientele. And so I needed to find a way to help build a stronger community and find more social entrepreneurs who wanted our services. So we started creating a local community of social impact entrepreneurs, and then ultimately created a global community of change makers as well with the United Nations called Plus Social Good. And that took me into creating Austin's first social impact incubator and Fast Pitch in 2013, and creating the whole Plus Social Good collective and movement. And then as soon as I did that for 3 years and created a high school version for our high school students in Title I schools here, in 2016, we moved into the college space and decided to work with college students and create that pathway for them. That's what then took me 2 years later to join the University of Texas at Austin and found the Office of Inclusive Innovation. So that's an abbreviated version of it, but essentially it's always been led by my heart. What feels right at this moment? And people are like, oh, well, that's a luxury. You get to... No, everyone should have the ability to listen to their heart. It's actually trying to guide you in every single step. And when you have what they call mind-heart coherence, Dispenza talks about this a lot, you're able to use your heart as a magnet, your mind as a conductor, and then guide your way into where you're actually supposed to be. And so I can't predict exactly where I am 5 years from now to the T, but I can tell you there's an orientation of where I want to go, and it's being led by my heart. It's always by listening and trusting myself and investing in the vision I've been given. And if everyone would do that, we will all end up creating a much better world.
There seems to be like a, well, I'll get to it, but I got to be practical. My heart, I know I ought to, but right now I got to eat. It's like there's this, because I'm vocalizing my own mind.
Same,
Rubén,
brother.
And I'm vocalizing other people's shares. But, in your experience, it was extraordinarily practical. It literally opened up doors for you and so many other people that these programs, these nonprofit organizations and alliances that saw real on-the-ground impact was completely led by your heart. And if you weren't led by your heart, you would have been, who knows what, you would have been doing, film production, film directing for big brands, and you would have been, in that state of like moral dissonance that you had got the initial sign of to say, no, we're going with the empowering path.
I never saw wealth as creating a prison, but now that I understand how wealth works, wealth can actually imprison you too. And what I mean by that is you can actually be really good at making wealth. That's not the issue. Is your heart, mind, and soul aligned to the wealth that you've created? And are you using it to actually regenerate wealth within your community? That's the second step most people think. Well, once I get the money, then I'll figure that out. No. How do you...
The means and the ends.
Together.
Yeah. I'll get to. It's like this put it off energy is what you're.
What's essentially our fear.
It's not the present moment too. Kind of to come back to the Zen piece. It's like what you are in the moment is what. There's a great Carl Jung line. You are what you do, not what you say you'll do.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And so we all have it. There's things that I still want to enact and take off. And the universe is conspiring and actually helping me do that. Like literally at the recording of this tape, the University of Texas has decided to close a division of diversity, also known as the Division of Campus and Community Engagement, closing our office essentially.
Yeah.
And it gives me a new opportunity to say, whoa, the thing that I've been talking about for a while now shows up at my doorstep. Do I still have that faith muscle inside of me to believe in what I've been called to do and love my brothers and expand impact? Or will I cower, right, and, choose a path that isn't in full alignment of who I am? This is my inner work. I'm being vulnerable and sharing it with everybody.
Yeah. Thank you.
But everybody has this crucible moment, several crucible moments, and you have an opportunity which way you'll go. And I'm super thankful they're having this because it's probably giving me the reassurance of what I need to do. But it's scary, right? Because there's no guarantee. But the guarantee is in the faith. It's in the.
There's never any guarantee out here in the material world.
It's always in the faith, and I realized the faith is what's manifested everything up to this point. I couldn't have described it 10 years ago that I would be here right now.
Sure, you had no idea.
But the amount of lives that we touch and transform,
Yeah.
it's immeasurable. And I'm like, whoa, this is actually better than what I see. You got to understand that 20 years ago, I wanted to be the next record mogul. My heroes at the time, I was naive, were P. Diddy and Russell Simmons. Russell Simmons.
Oh boy, things change.
Things change.
Yeah.
And I was in the music industry. I was
Rick Rubin's still doing all right, but
his
doing good.
His beard is longer than mine.
Yeah.
But
Rick, not
yeah, Russell.
Yeah.
And so think about it, is like, this is not to admonish them, right? Like, because I think I'm better than them. It's to say, wow, times change.
Yeah, be open to the unfolding.
The unfolding is like, wow, there was a different path that was carved out for me.
Sure.
And I just think about, what if I would have stayed in the music industry,
Well, you also, I really appreciate you sharing the current state of things, because I wasn't sure how much you were willing to chat about it with me and the listener. And, somewhat ironically, I mean, my family, speaking of cults, my family is in the cult of the Longhorn. We're not religious. We all wear orange all the time. Like, if you don't wear orange on game day, like, you're ridiculed in the Peck family. And it's because I went there, I met my wife there. My parents met there. I think most of my dad's siblings went there. My grandparents met at UT. So I'm like a double legacy Longhorn. And I'm very proud of that association. It's a great school. And then what happened 2 weeks ago is they closed Rubén's office.
Well, actually, that was April 2nd, by the way.
Oh, a month ago.
Yes.
A month ago, they closed Rubén's office. And then
2 weeks ago,
they sent in the state troopers to arrest children for trespassing on a lawn that they pay a lot of money to be on. That's some BS. Just that alone, let alone Free Palestine. But so I'm fairly I'm critical of my alma mater in May 2024, and you're one of the reasons for it. And so, kind of back to that point is like the malleability of the form of the material dream of, I say it maybe too much, but it's all sand through the fingers out here. Like, the only thing that, to your point earlier, is solid is your faith and your trust and that connection with Creator, that connection with love, the ground of being that is love. Everything else is going to just shave off. And that's true for every, thing, every person, and every, all of these little moments in our lives are just snapshots of time, So what's the eternal? What's the capital E eternal?
I think it's hard for people to contemplate and sit in that level of air, per se, when the system has us so fixated on surviving. And
True.
the way that you can control any population is to continually keep them in stress and survival mode. Because when they're continually run by fear, they will placate and then surrender so that they can secure safety. It is just in our nature as human beings. Except once in a while,
The domestication of the human animal.
there is once in a while some people who will say enough is enough,
Yeah.
and they will pierce through the veil and say this is what's actually happening. When say pay no attention to the man behind the curtain, no, there's a man behind the curtain, and we're tired of this game and we need to evolve the game. And so I think we're in that place right now. You're seeing the decay of institutions, of governments, not just locally, nationally, globally. Things are falling apart. And we have to ask ourselves, as this new era emerges, what will be the governing force? Will we have reached a higher level of sentience and consciousness to choose humanity and its well-being? Because at the end of the day, whether I grew up in an urban city or in the rural America, as a human to human, we want the best things that we want for our family and for ourselves. Politics aside, we want a safe community. We have different ways of going about that, but when we can actually have real dialogue and centered around love, and knowing that we may have different ways of seeing it, but I have the ability to expand my consciousness and empathy to see things from your side, we can find a way. But we're tired and exhausted because we've been manipulated and we've been oppressed and we have been coerced into believing particular narratives that keep us divided. And as long as we do that, we're not getting out of this hole.
Well said. And, it's interesting that you use the word break the veil, because break the veil is a mystic term. And typically when I use it, I do share similar anti-establishment viewpoints about power structures in the modern civilization. And at the same time, as a non-dualist, I'm comfortable with that title. The idea of breaking the veil doesn't actually apply to the socioeconomic structure. It actually applies to lowercase r reality to capital R reality as we know it, right? And so, I do think that there's overlap, because Jesus famously taught universal love. The state wasn't into it. MLK famously taught nonviolent love and peace and unity and was killed. And so there is an overlap there, but talk about the distinctions there. And, we're at that point of Reuben and Bob's coffee where we usually get here in terms of it's kind of like, again, being in the world, but not of the world. How much energy, attention, etc. in the dream versus focusing on transcendence.
You can choose to see this, and some people will say that this is a privileged statement, but you can choose to see this reality as a dream itself. Not because it's not real and it doesn't feel real, like this concrete feels real.
Yeah.
I get that.
Yeah.
And we can go on the quantum level. It's like there's no concrete there. It's all hollow space. We can talk about that too.
Yeah.
But our ability to hold both is important.
Yeah.
There's real pain being exerted and experienced in this reality. And yet, it is our moral duty to stand for what is fair and just for all people and use our voice in that manner, even when it's scary. That's one. But then two, understand how to allow us to move forward, because we're moving against each other. It's like a Chinese finger trap.
Right.
And we're not actually moving forward saying, where have I not loved my brother? Right? Why are we allowing these policies to exist that oppress my brother? Why am I self-inflicting oppression on myself? Two things can be true at the same time. Like, there's a concept called internalized capitalism. And internalized capitalism basically says that the attributes of capitalism of productivity at the most cost, right, at whatever cost, we then internalize it. So we're guilty. We feel guilty when we take time off. Or the United States.
I only know 500 people that feel guilty when they take off. And I'm the one going, take the
time
F off.
And that's what I'm getting at is this country has the least amount of vacation time taken. We're always overworked. And so we have to ask ourselves, what is it that we're actually doing here? What's the purpose of this? Well, we have to survive. That's a privileged statement to say. I'm not trying to say it from a privileged standpoint. I'm asking, we get to choose, and our voice is enhanced when we all get together and say, this is the world we want. Yes, we're going to find everything that's going to face against us and say, no, you're going to keep it the way it is. And yet we persist. And that's how humans evolve, right? And so the resilience that we have as humans is the most powerful thing. And yes, we're tired. Yes, we're exhausted. Yes, we need a break of fighting the system. But sometimes just remaining in that stand and committed, like I still am committed to something I said 5 years ago that said, if Austin's being spoken as one of the most economically disparate cities in the country for its size, what would it take for us to become the most equitable city in the country? Let me stand there and let me not remove myself from that stand. And everything that is against equity will show up in my face, and it'll test me to see if I'm willing to move from that and choose. And every day choose. It's the same thing as choosing love.
Yeah.
I'm sure sometimes your partner may get on your nerves. And you're like, I don't love you very much today. And you still stay because it's a choice.
Yeah.
And I think that's where the power is at. No matter what situation you find yourself in life, it's a choice.
That's really beautiful. And, I think another one of my heroes is a listener of the show knows by now is Thich Nhat Hanh. And he's, kind of the grandfather of the world. He's Vietnamese Yoda. I think he did a really damn good job of combining love and, what the Buddha, the word the Buddha uses is loving kindness, maitri, or metta, alongside of action, alongside of compassionate action. Thich Nhat Hanh was in the monastery when the bombs were dropping in Vietnam, and he famously said, I'm paraphrasing, but he said something like, it's hard to meditate when the bombs are dropping. So, time to protest, time to write, time to go walk the countryside and, concentrate on relief efforts for people who've just been bombed in the hills. We can't be up here banging these bells right now.
Completely in agreement.
And it's such a practical and true thing, and it comes from compassion. It's like that seems to be a teaching resonant throughout the mystics, so I bring it up all the time, is like, when you build that love up in your heart more and more, you access that place more and more, not only is it not selfish, it activates and energizes your actions in the world, and it allows you to see that empathy and relieve that suffering that you're talking about in a broken system. It's almost like, what else is there to do? Do stuff for my own transitory selfish pleasure, or like you said earlier, bypass or kind of trauma,
spiritual bypass, or trauma withhold,
all these different things. No. If that heart size is growing 3 inches too large, you're going to ride the sled down to Whoville. Mm-hmm. Shout out Dr. Seuss. And your social impact programs have done that in terms of, walk us through that. So you mentor students and very strong diversity crew, very strong female crew. I mean, it's really, I think it was all women recently, or there's all women employees, which is another choice to make, you know, in terms of, hey, you know, and not at the neglect or negation of
men,
people based on that, but you say, hey, let's even this out, you know.
I think that our ability to look beyond our immediate bias is our gateway to freedom. We are, just as we can become entrapped through wealth, enslaved through wealth, we can be enslaved through our own perspective and bias. And so I think what we came back to earlier, we're talking about this, is where are all the things in my life that I've allowed myself to become enslaved and entrapped to? Where have I created dependency, and where have I created an addiction to those things that I think are real, that ultimately will pass and not be here? And is that what I want my testament and legacy of this life and this chapter, this incarnation per se, to be? And if so, why is that? Because you're free to be enslaved in those things that you choose to be enslaved to. The choice is, make that choice, though. Because it's not a judgment saying, oh, you're an addict to XYZ or you're a slave to XYZ. Okay, and own it. And saying, this is why I want to have this be the experience I have in this lifetime. Because as long as you're authentic to that, then you can be authentic in your choices that you move in after that. And then that allows you to see the multiple perspectives that you may be missing and that other people are also trying to experiment. The issue is we're not willing to have that deeper conversation with ourselves because it makes us look at our shadow. And our shadow is scary. Carl Jung talks about this.
Oh, yeah.
I don't know if you want to expand on that.
Well, no, you're right. I mean, it's just so much easier to just drink it down and just take it to the grave. And it's not easier, actually. It's much more painful. But it's, in the short term, it's painful. And it's challenging. And, you know, there's a lot of, I don't know. I think this has been a theme coming up. Yeah, but I think you might have seen my video. It was like the best thing I've done in the last year, which is like, I'm love and light and pain and suffering.
Yes.
And it's like, you know, a lot of the spiritual community, and this is a generalization, love spiritualgram generally, but so many people in spiritualgram, you know, it's rainbows and butterflies. And, you know, I think even just like, I'm trying not to be too condemnatory here, because there are people I know that I really, really, really respect a lot, and, for example, haven't spoken on Palestine. And I don't think that, like, you speaking on Palestine is the defining characteristic of whether or not you're a good person. I'll never say that, and I don't believe that. Because I'm thinking of one person in particular that we've had conversations about. She is extremely passionate about the work she's doing that's helping people in her own way. And it's not that, I think if I'm making an accusation, which I guess is kind of a non-spiritual verb, but, you know, the accusation is when folks aren't doing that, when folks are, the love and light crowd, you know, what does that really mean? It means everything's fine, you know, and to your point earlier, it's like, can't both be true? Can't everything be fine on this macro totality view of it all unfolding, and also at the same time, shit's a little fucked up? You know, like, can we hold the paradox of those two truths? And I mean, I'm very passionate about Palestine. I stumbled into a documentary about it years ago, and so I learned about it. I didn't know that it was chaos, and it has been for 75 years until about 7-8 years ago, and was absolutely mind blown at the level of injustice that these people are being faced by our great ally. And there was even a period about, I think, 2020, 21, when I was like kind of a year or so after the film came out, where I was like, is that ever going to matter at all? Like, it didn't really get out there, played at a festival, you know. And then here we are 2 years later, and it was like all of that work informed a very complex, quote unquote, it's actually not that complex, but a complex geopolitical situation that gives me the level of some authority to speak on it in an intelligent way. So I don't know. To come back to your point, I think for me, what I say is like pick one. You know, it's like 0 is not enough probably, unless you're doing very deep work on yourself, which I also know people that are doing that. There's people that are doing shadow work. We don't want you in the world right now, probably, because you gotta get there. But if you are kind of just coasting along on this like stagnation train, Rubén and I warmly invite you to see where a level of injustice and difficulty, whether it be socioeconomic, whether it be, you know, cultural, political, whatever, to jump in on.
I like to just add that, and by the way, thank you for the documentary. Having visited the region in the past a couple years, there's a distinction of reading about it, hearing about it, and then being on the ground. And so I invite people to actually do the work, to actually go and not just read about it in the paper and go talk to real people on the ground. And I know it's like, well, that's a privileged thing to do. Not everyone can do that. Okay. As close as you can. If you want to be of service. I have friends that live in Israel and Tel Aviv. And I have people also in Palestine, close friends who help build the global network. I love both of them. And the situation hurts. And the best thing I can do is leverage my voice for justice. And from both perspectives, justice looks differently, right? And what I can say is, some people feel that what they were done is unjust. Other people feel that what done is unjust. I want to remind that as you do this work, there's going to be some learning in that process. Most people walk away from doing this work because they don't want to say the wrong thing, they don't want to make a mistake, they don't want to offend people. Equity work in general is messy. We're learning through the process. But learning how to use your voice in a most powerful and discerning manner is probably the best thing you can do, because when you stay silent in the face of injustice, you allow for those who breed on fear to continue to reign. And I think justice, when combined with love, can actually transform the world. But apathy and this sense of nihilism is what leads us to a place where we're at today.
Yeah, that's so true. I mean, I think to the messiness of it, and the messiness of like the Israel-Palestine situation, the messiness of, you know, equity and social economic injustice work, coming back to the earlier, 15 minutes into this conversation, choose the love side. It's like even if you make a misstep executionally in that strategic mediator or whatever you're doing in that world, as long as you're doing it from a loving place, you're going to be a lot closer to the solution of it and the resolution of it.
The second thing is, those who have done a level of research work, as new people come in, as they're learning, like for example, in diversity training, we usually, in a multi-day training, we usually see the decrease of white men slow down or decrease on the second or third day. They feel attacked. They feel that this work is all against them.
I was there day one.
Yeah.
I was there on Monday.
But they won't stick there, and they feel attacked. And so it's not necessarily about creating a safe space for people who have been in privilege and power, but there is a way to create, like Thich Nhat Hanh said, a compassionate way of creating space so that even those who are reticent of the message can allow themselves to step into a space where they can be transformed, or when transformation can happen. And that's the dance.
Yeah.
Because like in my class, I come with students from all across different ethnicities, backgrounds, etc. And we have to create a larger space that holds all of their identities, all of their trauma, all of their experiences, and then create a unified vision of what we want to create together. Leaders aren't doing that today.
Well, this is why I'm not scared of those trainings, is because of mystic philosophy. So Yogananda says, we've all been fat, we've all been skinny. We've all been rich, we've all been poor. We've all been famous, we've all been unknowns. We've been all these roles and all these incarnations, and the goal is to not be too attached. You're still doing it. You're the actor. You're playing the role. Hit your mark, baby. Say the line,
Yep.
Deliver the line and get the applause break, etc. But at the same time, you're behind the mask in terms of the mystic philosophy view. And so I think what a lot of white men in corporate America aren't mystics. And so they feel attacked or get offended that, well, hey, I didn't not hire the black guy, so why do I feel shame for this, And my answer to any corporate white men listening to this Mystic podcast is, you're behind it, but right now you're occupying this view. So you can let go of any accusation towards this persona, and at the same time, while you're this persona, it's actually, I've found it to be very powerful. I'm going to get choked up. I'm in a Palestinian activist group at work, and it's literally like, it's probably 100 Palestinians, 100 Arabs and Muslims. There's about a dozen Jews, which is like the homies. I think I'm the only non-ethno-culturally tied person. I'm a Texas white boy named Bob in the Palestinian group. And I've got several nice messages that they appreciate my participation. And it's because it's very clear to me that it's powerful. Like, why wouldn't you? It's like, and I know you can relate to that.
Excuse me. I choked up too. The concept of privilege has been debated so much.
Yeah.
And privilege essentially is defined by something you didn't earn. And I didn't earn being born a man in this society. Yet I have the privilege of being a man in a society. I don't have to look around and worry about my safety all the time.
Yeah.
That is a peace of mind that I have psychologically that impacts the way I live my life. Yet at the same time, in the social structure, I'm identified as a Latino man, indigenous Latino man, which comes with a couple of privileges and others that not so much. So on my birth certificate, it identifies as white, right? Because Hispanic white, right?
Yeah, you guys are lumped in with us on that.
But somehow I don't get the same privileges that a white man would, right?
Yeah.
And so, okay, I say to myself, okay, well, these are the chips I've been dealt. That doesn't take away from who I am as an individual spirit and human being and heart. How can I cash in my privilege so that those who may not have been born with my privilege have access to a better life? So that we can all do better. So we live by the philosophy of Ubuntu, because Ubuntu says, I am because you are, and you are because I am, and together we are one. This concept of being collectively together in power, this is why giving up your privilege, it doesn't mean that you give up your humanity. It actually enhances your humanity. And so I'm inviting people to say, where could I do more? First off, keep the oxygen mask on yourself, right? Don't be just people out there. I'm a martyr. Like, hold on, no one's asking you to be a martyr. But could you actually lend a hand where you could? Like, my team, like you saw my team that night, like, we given opportunities for all these young women to step into leadership roles, right? And they're
crushing.
And they're crushing it, right? And so it's like, where can I be the most impact? Now, mind you, my next sector...
It's a fun game, to be honest.
My next sector, most people are not talking about, is young Latino men and the rate of suicide and the rate of dropouts, etc. It's like, okay, we need to come back. We might have gone this way for a second. We need to come back over here. So it's always this pendulum. But my work that I stand by in helping create a women's program for entrepreneurship and executive leadership stands firm. My programs in helping create a pathway for first-gen low-income and diverse students stands on itself. And I can't wait to see what the next version of the work will take on. But I'm constantly looking to say, what does the next generation need, and what can I do to support that? Because I'm only here for, like you, a period of time in this incarnation.
Yeah.
But my children...
Clock's ticking.
Exactly. But my children deserve clean air, clean water, decent healthcare and shelter and food, etc. What am I doing to help propagate that?
That's really nice. Yeah, I really like using the privilege enhances the humanity. I think that's an important chess move in the... Because even that word privilege, like, you can just feel white people heighten up, you know? And it's like, whoa, like, we're just saying that there's studies where, and I'm sure you guys cite these in your work in the social impact programs and DEI programs, where it's like, look, there's researchers that will make resumes that are literally white male, white female, black male, black female, and they'll apply evenly with a computer algorithm of the randomization to the companies, and white men get more replies by the recruiter. I mean, it's literally like, it's not a mystery. So yeah, use it. You know, how can we support? How can we serve? And I think coming back to like the entrepreneurial piece, and this is something I've talked about with a few people, is like, you know, one thing I'm really, Rubén, I'm getting there, but I'm trying to relinquish my like starving artist glorification days. I'm always going to be like, I was a starving artist in my 20s as a filmmaker, but like I think I'm also coming out of like Buddhist Hindu renunciant model, like less is more thing, which we kind of opened up at the top, interestingly enough. But, you know, to say that like, no, it's okay to be successful. Actually, it's okay to be successful. It's good to be successful, and because what you can do is help more people. You can help yourself and help others. You can help your community. You can become a force for good much more easily once you're at that certain level of like continued work over time. Whereas starving artists aren't really changing the socioeconomic nature of the community as much. For example, you know, I mean, it's there's a lot of positives that come from this.
So there's a fine line in walking that.
Yeah.
Because I want to make a clear distinction that it's not advocating a prosperity gospel that you can find a lot in Christianity.
Yeah.
God wants you to be rich, right? Give us money, you will have money more.
It's a really nuanced tightrope.
It's a nuanced tightrope saying my abundance comes because of my connection, one, with the community and source. True wealth is created within community. So wealth, as defined in the way I see it, is a circulatory process where it allows me to get wealth, but it allows me to reinvest it in my community. And my community has the ability to reinvest it into me. And so it becomes a circular, continual process that grows together. The distinction is today we have corporations who are extractive, who will come and set up shop in a community, and the wealth of the community is then drawn out by these corporations and held in offshore, I'm generalizing here, in offshore accounts.
Cayman Islands.
And
there's 20,000 businesses in a 3-story office. In
And
the
yet
Cayman Islands.
exactly, and yet we have no accountability, and we have to our brothers and sisters on local ground. If anyone studies where the unhoused situation emerged from, go back to the Nixon days. Go back to the divestment of mental health hospitals. Understand what happened to the community. And then like, oh, well, they just need to pull up themselves by the bootstraps. I'm being sarcastic here, but your people like that's their choices.
Well, even the term bootstraps, did you know that was a satirical because you can't do it, and yet it's become, ironically, a straightforward phrase now. Yeah.
Yes. And so the point being is that the beloved community is something I ask people to look into. If you don't know what the beloved community is that Dr. King talked about, go and just Google that right now and pause it and come back. We have a responsibility to our community. Our community has made us. If we lose that, we lose all ability to truly build sustainable wealth. You might build wealth on the short term, but it won't actually be wealth that actually creates generational wealth. So what we're looking here is generational wealth in abundance. Not because I need to keep all the money, but because the wealth comes from the word waylay. We talked about this yet? I learned from my friend David Armistead. And he said the word waylay is Old English, and it means well, like the spring, where all well-being comes from. This is why you don't poison the well. Everyone takes it. The water belongs to everybody, and it nourishes everything.
No, it belongs to Nestle.
Nestle says that humans don't have... I'm paraphrasing here.
Well, yeah, we don't have any rights in America, so...
In certain corporations have taken advantage of the natural resources of water. Look in Mexico and look at big software drink maker. Yeah. You can do your own research. Yeah. And sometimes it's cheaper and easier to find soft drinks than it is to actually find clean water. So what I'm saying here is wealth needs to be centered around community. All forms of capital come from a culture and a community that cares and is compassionate about itself.
Do you think that, in kind of one of the points of view I see in kind of activist circles and progressive circles, which, I think you and I are a part of generally, is that, for example, with like the environmental protection stuff, there's kind of a joke that, we can all recycle every day for the rest of our lives, and yet it won't be enough because it's like 30 companies are responsible for like 70%. And guess what? Like, I work at a big company. I'm not making that many decisions, on the future of the company. So that means that it's got to be a pretty small number of companies, and it's got to be a pretty small number of human beings behind the companies. Like, do you think about, from like a strategic standpoint, like working with those leaders? I know you've been in bigger meetings than I've been in terms of, handshakes and suits and all that, like how are these people from another planet? Like, what are they blinded by greed? I mean, it seems like probably the latter, not the former, fear. But they're afraid. And well, I mean, I think it seems like greed just from the mystic standpoint. And by the way, this other guy from Nazareth talked about greed not being that great. It seems like greed is a part of it. Once you get 1 million, you want to get 10. I mean, it's never enough for some folks, and it sounds like. But that is fear-based, actually. You're right.
So greed is fear-based. It's always been sourced in that. And capitalism, in the way it functions today, is built on, the Wolf of Wall Street, the 80s.
Yeah.
This is where it took us.
Yeah.
And we're seeing the aftermath of it now. It is time for us to look at ourselves and say, what actually served us? Because we'll be like, oh, so greed is good because it created all these jobs and whatnot. On the long term, I think greed is a survival mechanism. And it's also, I'm not a therapist, so I'm not a psychologist. I'm not here to be able to make a diagnostic.
We're not a therapist, we're not lawyers, and we're not tax professionals.
But I will say that I think greed is a mental condition.
Yeah.
and we need to understand where it's being sourced from and why. And once we start doing that, then we are able to break through onto the other side. Because one thing that FDR did tell us is that fear isn't actually real. And so once we're
He said
able,
that?
I think so. He says there's nothing to fear but fear itself.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So fear isn't real, even though it seems like the most realest thing ever. It's an illusion of it. And so once we're able to see past that, the game's over.
Yeah.
But can you get people to see past it?
Well, to me, too, it comes back to the very beginning of this conversation, which was you being vulnerable about the office being closed and saying, I can choose. I can choose the fear of the uncertainty, or I can choose the love and the trust that it's going to work out. And it's like, if we're tracing back the well being poisoned by greed and the socioeconomic injustice coming from greed, coming from a small number of human beings, coming from those individual human beings' choices of fearful greed, kind of clinging, really is what the Buddha says, is the word attachment to that, to nothing, to nada, versus the trust that it's going to be, working out for the highest when you choose with love.
And I think that's the leapfrog that we need in our consciousness.
Yeah.
But try to tell an investor that things are just going to work out. No, they need to see numbers, spreadsheets, projections. Even though, the truth be told, you can write a 3-year pro forma and none of your numbers are actually correct when you first write it out. Then it doesn't happen that way. There's adjustments. The best is your
Everything's
assumption.
made up and the points don't matter.
And it's your ability to sell the dream as best as you can and the illusion of confidence.
Yeah. So well said. And you've talked to more investors than me. How can we support you? Oh, wait, before we do that, you've coached a lot of aspiring entrepreneurs. There's been a lot of I've learned a lot today. I learned a lot from every conversation we have. Anything maybe recently in the last, 3 to 9 months working with your students and mentees that has become apparent to you in terms of practical advice for aspiring entrepreneurs, aspiring change makers?
The world is changing rapidly. We won't just have a battle of how to deal with the impact of AI. We will have a battle to understand the impact of our humanity. What I mean by that is we're not going to be able to beat AI for what AI does, right? It's going to create multiple realities. You don't even know what reality is.
Sam Altman just said GPT-4 is going to be the dumbest thing you've ever messed with. And it's pretty good.
Yeah. And so when it coming lightning fast and then being integrated into businesses, the next thing that I'm focusing on is having a conversation of what does it mean to be human in the age of AI? What does it mean to be a spiritual human in the age of AI when AI lacks spirituality? It may feign a spiritual ability, but inherently we know what spirituality is. It's not just a made-up concept. It's something deep inherent of our maker in our DNA. And so we're going to need that more than ever if humanity is going to progress. Whether a singularity comes about or not and we merge with machines is a separate conversation.
Another podcast episode.
Another one I'll come back to next time. But for now, the thing I've learned from my students is you're going to need to learn how to be more human more than ever. That means being in touch with your emotions and your vulnerability and your trauma. Because those are all the ingredients that will help you transform into the next leader of tomorrow. When you're able to face the shadow, as Jung talks about, you're able to enhance and transform and then openly transcend. Your ability to know how to walk and make decisions based on that previous work that you've done will outbeat an AI in the sense of you will create new things that an AI could not have come up with because it is uniquely yours. If more humans, AI can assist, AI can augment, AI can maybe play a pseudo therapist for you.
Write the YouTube description.
Great. But no one's going to substitute your work. Your work is coming back to authenticity, coming back to love, and doing your true transformative work that it's called on you. So my students, I'm calling them to rise up, not to be scared of AI, to learn about AI, but to learn about themselves in the same manner, because the more they can do their inner work, the better the world will be. Because we won't have leaders trying to project their trauma. As you can see, some of our top leaders and some of our richest billionaires are projecting out their trauma out onto the world, and they're playing, excuse the language, pissing games about who can get to space faster.
Yeah.
And under the guise of like, this is what we're doing for humanity. But we can see the shadow right there.
Yeah.
And we wonder if they see it themselves.
Well, I really could use a GPT authenticity bot, but I think you're right. It's got to come from elsewhere. Rubén Cantú, my man, change maker. Love is the ground of all being. We're basically talking future and politics and economic injustice from the standpoint of like a Mr. Eckhart quote, which is why I love you. Thanks for being on, my brother.
Thank you for having me.
Cheers.
Cheers.